Welcome back, everyone. This is Jon Wizard and YourTown TV. We're going to continue the conversation today about affordable housing, and I want to dive right in. And CJ, you mentioned in the last segment something about affordable housing and fair housing. Could you talk a little bit more about fair housing and what that means?
Sure. Like we alluded to in the prior segment, affordable housing entails a lot. It's a huge bird's eye view down when we talk about affordable housing, and it includes policies such as inclusionary housing or a policy like a density bonus ordinance, but also affordable housing looks at planning. And for example, we talk about fair housing, and fair housing the goal is to generate and have the whole entire population have access to housing, regardless of your income, regardless of your background, regardless of your demographics. And so when we talk about fair housing, we want to create opportunities for all segments of the population. And what the city's doing, along with other partners, which include the County of Monterey, the Housing Authority of the County of Monterey as well, the City of Seaside, the City of Monterey, and the City of Salinas. In this particular case, 5 entities are partnering up to do a regional fair housing study. And that regional fair housing study is called the Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice. It's a really long term. This comes from HUD. It's also known in acronym form as an AI. And what we're really looking for in this study is to, number one, get a good landscape of the current fair housing environment and the environment that we're in right now. And in addition to that, to look at the existing policies that have been in place and assess those, assess the prior fair housing goals and policies that were set forth by entities such as these, and to then do updated analysis, and then to go beyond that to figure out action plan on how we're going to address fair housing in today's environment in 2018 and looking forward 5-7 years down the road. So we're going to assess kind of how we've done and look at how the environment has changed, because the environment has changed quite a bit. There's new laws that have passed, for example. There's new ballot measures on this year, that are on the block, as we talked about Prop 10, Prop 5, things that can change the landscape. Rent control has been out there. That's a hot topic out in broad communities. The homeless population as well has been a hot topic, especially in Monterey County. So when you're looking at a fair housing regional study, you're looking at how can we have access, how can we house folks, how can individuals have housing for homeless, for seniors, for veterans, for low income, for moderate income, for rental, for ownership, and so on and so forth. So we're really looking at that, and I think this is a really important study that we're doing regionally, and I think it's going to have a really positive impact on Monterey County. Fair housing bleeds beyond any jurisdiction, so this is a national issue that we're talking about here. So it's important that we do that here in Monterey County, and I'm glad Monterey Bay Economic Partnership is always on board, always supportive, always with all these policy documents I mentioned, inclusionary, the fair housing. We have all kinds of different studies, and I know Matt's going to talk about farm worker housing probably at some point. And so MBEP has been really, really instrumental in these policy documents and these studies, and giving us feedback too, looking from a different lens, from a third party, for someone from also that has expertise, but also just kind of like the outside looking in too, to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? Everything, and that's what we want. We want the community's feedback in these studies. It's not the government driving this. We want to hear from the residents. We want to hear from the populations that I just mentioned. We want to hear from the organizations and the consultants and also city council and planning commission. We want to hear from all, so we can set forth the best policies that will have the greatest effect when it comes to fair housing in our communities. So,
CJ, I think you bring up some really important things, specifically the ballot measures. I know Prop 1 and Prop 2 have to do with allocating funds for people who are most in need of housing resources, but also Prop 5 with the transfer of property tax assessments, and Prop 10 with the ability for local jurisdictions to do rent control in their own communities. Those are definitely something to look out for on your ballot. However, CJ, you might as well be running the interview. That's exactly the next question I wanted to ask was, Matt, could you talk to us a little bit about that farm worker housing study that MBEV did? Because on the peninsula, I don't hear a whole lot about it because we don't have a lot of farm workers on the peninsula. Some, but not nearly as many as in Salinas and South County and the whole Salinas Valley. So if you could talk about that and how that fits into the wider concept of affordable housing as it might affect people on the peninsula, for instance.
Sure, yeah, and I just want to make sure that it's clear the city of Salinas took the leadership role in terms of making sure that this effort was going forward as part of their general plan and housing element update process. It became very clear that we had the need to have more real-time information as part of identifying what the needs were in the community. So not only in Salinas, but there was a broad consensus that, hey, the farm worker housing need went well beyond the borders of the city, with the city of Salinas in Monterey County and really our Monterey Bay region being kind of the largest element of that need. But again, there was such a need for more information and data as to where are folks living, where are the opportunities to improve housing, what are the conditions like, because we hear about it, we drive by it sometimes, we hear word of mouth. What this study did was actually demystify several things, actually. I'll note a couple of them, but the study focused on and achieved at least 420 surveys of actual farm workers that are working the fields now, and their families and their conditions, and it did it in a very direct and confidential way, because as you know, there's this climate, particularly when we're talking about 60-70% of this population are undocumented. It was very difficult actually to get information from folks when their confidentiality might be at risk. So there was a team of several folks from the community that had ties or had the ability to communicate directly with the farm worker community to actually get them to provide very sensitive information about their living conditions, et cetera, and their needs. So that was a critical piece of it and part of the city's effort to kind of pull that together with a large steering committee. I actually sat on the oversight committee, and the oversight committee was a large coalition of ag growers, shippers, private interest developers, nonprofit developers, the several cities, especially with the city of Salinas helping to convene that whole process, elected officials as well. And so some of the findings, as an example, when I was asked just last year before the study came out, how many ag workers do you think are working in our region, both the Pajaro Valley, which includes Watsonville and greater Watsonville area, and part of Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, Salinas Valley area? Okay, how many workers do you think? And I would think, maybe 20, 30,000, something like that, which is a lot. The study found over 90,000 people on an annual basis are actually working in the fields or something related to agriculture in that space on an annual basis. That's 1 in 4 of our workers across in our region in terms of households. One in every 4 households has an ag worker. And so we have, another element that it found was the intense overcrowding for farm worker households. On average, it's about 2.5 people per household. But when the survey found that there was over 7 people living in per household. And then in some cases there was instances of 15 people living in, 20 people living in a house. There's on average folks had the ratio was 5 to 1 in terms of 5 people per one bathroom. And there was a lot of cases of children getting urinary infections and just terrible conditions, just waiting for the bathroom. So all these different conditions, lots of non-conforming uses, whether it's garages or sheds or just all these different conditions that were documented through this process. And so with that then became, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And where is this what kind of plan can be identified to deal with it? So there's a set of recommendations that came out of this and basically rolled into an implementation plan. So Monterey Bay Economic Partnership's role at this point is to partner with the city of Salinas and others to help make sure that all the recommendations around land use policy changes, funding opportunities, planning efforts that need to happen across jurisdictions to deal with this effort to try to create more housing for farm worker families, that it gets done sooner than later. And the first major goal is to do at least try to figure out how we can get at least 5,300 homes for farm worker families in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's just the first goal, but we know that there's, again, that 90,000, and then the overall finding said there's a need for at least over 30,000 units now in order to relieve the overcrowding conditions that we know exist in our community. So there's this incredible, overwhelming need. We try to identify a target, and again, one of the things to remember about the farm worker study too is that it really demystified this whole notion around and try and build clarity around the overcrowded situation. Because another thing that I would always think is like, well, you know what? A lot of families, because my family in the Central Valley here in California, part of my family, we lived through that in terms of just, you know, hey, you double up. You have different family members join, you know, your tias and your tios and other people, just, you know, you make it work. And so that's how I think a lot of people think about it. But what the study found was that the majority of overcrowded households had unrelated multiple families living in houses. So that's where issues come up as well when you have minors, you know, again, sharing bathrooms with people that they don't even know. And so, you know, there's lots of issues that can happen with a lot of unrelated folks trying to just survive and living in overcrowded conditions. So we need to relieve that as soon as we can. And so there's a lot of effort and coordination happening now. We're helping to lead that charge again with several others, and trying to identify and activate the opportunities across the region to make sure that we create as many units as we can, as soon as we can.
Matt, thank you for that. I think it's important to understand that when you say 5,300 homes are the goal for today, we need 30,000 total to better serve this population. But 5,300 today is what we need to build. I think it's important that the public, the audience, remembers that we're not saying that only farm workers need more housing, but we're saying that if we can create 5,300 homes as soon as practicable, we relieve a lot of pressure on the housing market for people who are not farm workers. And that ties into my next question for CJ about, we hear about Chinatown all the time in the news. What is it that we're trying to achieve in Chinatown, and how does that relate to the local housing issues as a whole?
So Chinatown, for the viewers at home, is a very small geographic area in Salinas. It's about 3-4 blocks worth, but it's a staple piece of, you know, property. You know, the area that in Chinatown has such a significant impact on the rest of the community. Chinatown has a lot of history culturally, as we know as well. So we're trying to revitalize Chinatown, okay? And that is going to entail more than just housing investment. We're also looking at economic investment as well, creating job opportunities, also taking a look at the traffic flow and getting Chinatown to be more connected to the rest of the community, because Chinatown geographically is very close to our downtown. It is also close to a local transit stop as well. And so the city of Salinas is in the process of doing a Chinatown revitalization plan, where we've reached out to property owners of Chinatown and also to residents who live within Chinatown. And one of the strategies that the city of Salinas is looking at is to expanding the current geographic area of Chinatown to include more residential properties in that area, for purposes of getting access to more funding, grant funding, for example, through the state, making it more attractive for tax credit projects that can generate affordable housing, for example. And part of the investment also is occurring right outside of Chinatown. For example, the Housing Authority of the County of Monterey Development Corporation is in the process and almost completing, for example, a 50-unit apartment complex called Haciendas Phase 3. The same entity just finished 40 units of senior apartments right outside of Chinatown, And so the Housing Authority is investing right on the edges, but we also have a new project with Mid-Penn Housing called Moongate Plaza. And this is a mixed-use project when we talked about economic development opportunities, and in addition to residential housing opportunities, this is a mixed use where the ground floor will be commercial retail, and 3 stories above will be 90 units of affordable housing. 88 specifically in 2 managers units, but 88 of those units will be for affordable housing ranging from extremely low to low income. In addition, this project is very unique because number one, it's right in the heart and soul of the Chinatown. It's located at 21 Soledad Street. This is about a $40 million project. This is a huge investment in the community. And this housing is going to also have designated units for those that are currently homeless. So we're hoping to house some of the existing homeless population and get them a foot in the door and give them an opportunity at permanent housing. In addition, case managers, social workers will also be a part of this development. So it's more than just providing individuals with stable, affordable, decent housing. It's also providing them with the services that they need: transportation, to get to jobs, to get to school, so on and so forth. So the other things that the city has done is they help fund a Chinatown Health Center, which is a place where homeless individuals or any individuals from the public can go in and have hygiene, take showers and whatnot. So we're really looking at this area as a huge investment. So.
Well, I think that's incredible because the state does have a vision of housing first as it relates to providing services to people, especially people who are homeless and those that are struggling to find decent living conditions. The idea being that if we can house people, all of the things that come secondary, like a lack of refrigeration for medication and a lack of refrigeration for healthy foods, and being able to keep your belongings and your pets that are oftentimes not permitted in shelters, that housing first policy really solves a lot of those secondary and tertiary problems that prevent people from getting into the transitional type housing that we're more accustomed to. So we're going to talk next about financing and how we do on a macro scale, how we get these projects built in our communities, because without being able to pay for it, we'll never see it. This is YourTown TV. Stay tuned for the last segment.